Good evening. I am very excited for the program this evening. I'm excited that each one of you are here tonight. I'm also excited and grateful to Dr. Braman for being with us this evening. And thank you for patiently waiting. We were trying to iron out some technical difficulties. But let's have a word of prayer. Thank the Lord just for life and health. And let's ask Him to be with us this evening. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you, Lord, for your goodness and love. I thank you, Father, for all the good things that you have created for us to enjoy as far as our food, and that they are healing. And I ask, Lord, a special blessing tonight upon Dr. Braman as he speaks to us, and give him clarity and wisdom and help us to understand what he shares with us, and may it be a blessing to each one. Thank you, in Jesus' name, amen. All right, Dr. Braman, we're looking forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. I think we are on. So, as we get started here, just a little bit about me. Is this loud to you or just to me? Perfect? Okay, good. So, I'm Dr. Braman. I'm a physician. I'm from the Northwest. Yes. Oregon boy, born in Portland. Grew up in different parts of Oregon. So the Northwest and Oregon is home for me. My professional journey has been through lifestyle medicine. So I'll spare you the story, but I actually grew up swearing I would never be a doctor. Don't say things like that. I've learned better than to say what I will never do. But long story short, I ended up doing medicine. I was interested in a more comprehensive, more holistic approach since before medical school. Both my father and my wife's father went to Loma Linda University. They went to medical school, both very idealistic, wanting to go help people, change the world, came out very broken people. So I actually went through medical school when I did end up going, rather cautious, shall we say. I didn't want that to happen to me. I didn't want to come out a broken, messed up person. But in this process, sparing you many details, I was initially going to go into an academic career. I was going to go into research. Because they taught us, as we were going through medical school, that we do evidence-based medicine. What does the science show? That's what we want to do. I said, this is great. I totally agree. I'm on board. So I thought, well, if I go do academics and do the right research, then the world is going to change. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way. It took me a while to figure that out, but I had an aha moment during my internship year, took a different route, ended up doing a master's in public health in epidemiology, which is the science of medical research, did residency in preventive medicine, which actually is a formal medical specialty, but didn't go into academics. Ended up getting involved in developing the field of lifestyle medicine as a new field. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine, I spent many years helping build and grow and develop. So just like there's an American Academy of Family Practice, or OBGYN, or orthopedic surgery, there's now an organization for lifestyle medicine, which is pretty cool. And it's growing and it's doing good things, and we're developing standards and criteria and conferences and all that. Sparing other details, I'm interested in changing healthcare. And hopefully we can help change some of your health and healthcare this evening. As we get started, I'd like to find out a little bit about who's here. Where you're coming from, what your interests are, and what you hope to get out of tonight. So that as we talk and do some interaction, I can be the most useful that I can to you. So I'm assuming most all of you are local, right? What are you most interested, maybe not one local? Astoria, okay. Well, welcome. And
we're from down near San Diego, California. We heard you were talking tonight.
Flew up from San Diego. All right. Well, I'm honored. Well, however or why ever you're here, it's good to have you here. What are your interests? I know there's a focus on weight management and weight, but is that your total interest, or do you have any other interests on health conditions or things you want to get out of tonight? Yes. Reducing inflammation, okay. Eating healthy. Yes. The value of probiotics. Okay, let's get into a little bit of minutia, but
Learning more about processed food and its impact on the body.
processed food. So I'm hearing food questions. Okay. What else? Yes.
There seems to be a drive in our nation at this point for longevity. Longevity is fine as long as you have quality of life. When quality of life is gone, what good is longevity?
So emphasis on longevity, but what about quality? Absolutely. If you don't have quality, so what? Let's get it over with. All right? Okay, well, very good. So we'll try to touch on some of these food things as we go. Part of what I want to do for you this evening is not just talk about food or just talk about weight, but give you some context or framework within which to understand things. How do you put the pieces together so you come up with a way of managing your own health that really makes sense and is not just confusion? I find that people are so confused. All the stuff they get in their mail or they hear on the ads on TV, all the stuff you're trying to get sold all the time, magic pills and potions and infomercials. I mean, it's crazy. It's just crazy, and people are so confused. It's a new diet every year or two, right? Big new book and push and product lines, and people are so confused, healthcare providers included, they just kind of throw up their arms and say, they're going to change their mind next year anyway. Just eat it. Okay, so we want to clear some of that up. In terms of weight and weight management or losing weight, most people want to lose weight in America. Do you ever stop and think there's actually a lot of different ways to lose weight? No, I'm not just meaning surgery or pills.
Well, the latest thing this year is that you eat more fats to lose weight.
What was the first part of it?
Eat more fats.
Eat more fats to lose weight?
I found that the president who was president when I was born, Eisenhower, anyway, he had a heart attack, and I didn't realize that, and that's when they started pushing to eat less fat, even though they studied on him and they found that we need more fat, but they turned it around and told people to eat less fat.
More fat, less fat. What do we need to do with fat?
Pyramid, you're also eat 15% fat.
Okay.
Right now, I'm hearing you need to eat about 30% fat.
Okay, 30%, 15% fat. Good, thank you, gentlemen. Let's talk about fat as we go. We're going to get to, what's the ideal diet at one point here. But what are the different ways of losing weight? Just think of someone you've seen get really skinny. What happened to them? Exercise. What about starvation? Concentration camp. Chemotherapy. Cancer. Cryonics. There's all kinds of ways of losing weight. The point being, are they all healthy? If I take chemotherapy every day to lose weight, and I lose lots of weight because I was overweight and I want to lose, is that a good idea? Yes, sayonara. It's not a good idea. We want to pay attention to weight, but don't use weight as our sole measure. It really shouldn't be our sole measure of health. Okay, I want to share a few stories with you starting out. How many of you have heard of Nathan Pritikin? Okay, most of you, good. Yeah, Nathan Pritikin. So there's a Pritikin Center in Florida now, and I've gone down and visited there a couple times. And it was fun sitting down and talking with the staff, and I was talking with this one, I think he was early 50s, local gentleman, South American ancestry, I think. He was a staff member, just sitting with him at a table, and he was telling me some of his own story. So we're sitting there talking, and he says, yeah, I started working here, and, something wasn't right, and I went to see my doctor, and I was just losing weight, and nothing made sense. I hadn't changed anything that I knew of, But my doctor sat down with me and he started asking me all kinds of questions. And we figured out that, well, here when I work, they give me free food. And since I'd started working here, I'd started losing weight. Hadn't tried to, wasn't working at it, but got down to a nice, normal, healthy weight without even realizing what was going on. He thought something was the problem. Until the doctor found out, well, what are you eating? Oh, well, yeah, you should be losing weight. You're eating really, really healthy food. You're not doing the typical American thing anymore. That's the kind of weight loss I think most of us would like, right? Don't even realize what's going on. Lifestyle Center of America, they're not open anymore, but I went and spent some time there years ago, and I sat down and was talking with this diabetic gentleman. It was actually his second time there. He was just coming back kind of for a refresher. Interestingly enough, this is when I was in residency in Southern California. He had come from the VA medical center that I rotated through. This was back in the Midwest. We both ended up back in the Midwest to hear about the story about doing things different than the normal way. He had come there on hundreds of units of insulin a day, tons of medications, with a walker barely able to get across the room. He was actually on the schedule back at the VA Medical Center to have both of his feet cut off. Amputation. His feet were so bad. He had left that center after 3 weeks the previous time, completely off of insulin, way down on his medications, and walking miles every day. 3 weeks. They weren't teaching me that at medical school, unfortunately. They weren't practicing that at the VA. I tell you that to tell you what is possible, how powerful lifestyle can be if we do what the body wants, what it's built for, and give it a chance to heal, repair, and recover. Another gentleman that I had years ago, this was back in Pennsylvania, we were running a primary care clinic with a lifestyle medicine program and components. And I had this patient, he was older, he had retired, he was a journalist. Social bug, he loved people, he loved talking and doing stuff. And his kidneys were failing. He was headed towards dialysis. Started working with our dietitian, our program. His kidneys came back. Got back pretty much to normal. He had heart problems, he had diabetes, all kinds of things. And he was doing great for a while, and then he started going down again. And his kidneys started going down again. Like, what's going on? Well, it turns out, as a retired journalist, his life was going down to the local diner and hanging out with the guys. This was not a health food diner. And yeah, he knows what's possible and how good he'd done, but that was his life. And so we worked with him for a while. We'd see him back, going downhill, headed towards dialysis again. And then I see him back, and all of a sudden his numbers are back up doing great. And he's feeling good, and he's happy, and he's excited. I'm like, talk to me. What happened? What made this difference? Why are you now back on the wagon, so to speak, and living in a way that your body really likes? Well, I was sitting thinking one day, and I realized I really want to be there for my granddaughter's graduation and wedding. The point being, if we don't have quality, who cares about the quantity? That's a really big deal as we talk about health. Why do we do what we do? Or not do bad things that we don't do? The why is really, really important. And we need to look at that and put that into our picture. Okay, so let's look at a slide or two here. So as we build some healthcare, let me see. I'm going to skip a couple slides here, I think, and we'll come back to this. So one thing I realized here not too long ago is that these are some slides from a professional presentation. Did you know you're like a neuron? This is a picture of neurons. Did you know that we are like neurons? Well, yeah, our head's full of them, but actually as a whole person, we're like neurons. And why is that? Because we are a complex thing Neuron has all kind of, the DNA and the mitochondria and all these pieces inside, and it does things, and it gets messages, and it sends messages. So we're physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, but we're also built for connection. What is the point of a neuron if it doesn't connect? If it doesn't send or receive messages? There's no point. When you talk to people, when you look at the science, you find out from all different angles of scientific research, life is about connection. It's about interaction. What makes life meaningful? Well, it's sharing it with the people I care about. It's doing something nice for someone else, or someone else doing something nice for me. But about the worst torture you can do to someone is isolate them. Make them alone. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, make them alone. That is hell. You want a good definition of hell? That is the essence of it. Aloneness. So we're fundamentally built for connection, for what that means, what that looks like. And this is an illustration that I use. In medicine, in health, we talk about the physical level. But that is to support us, to give us a vehicle to enjoy life. It is not the end goal. Just because I get my cholesterol to this magic number, my existence is fulfilled. I don't think so. That's nice, but we want the physical there so that we can enjoy the mental, emotional, spiritual to connect like neurons in life. Okay, the other thing I'm going to give you at least a framework on is this. We're not going to do the exercise today, but I've done this exercise with all kinds of audiences. It's fun to do, public and professional. Start with a blank piece of paper and say, let's design healthcare. Forget everything you know, everything you see. Let's just design healthcare from scratch that makes sense. Throw out any and every therapy you can possibly think of. So we put it all on the board, whatever it is. Put it in groups. Now, you do have to understand that the science shows that 70 to 90% of our problems, our diseases, are lifestyle caused. That is an important caveat. If you don't understand that, you might get off. So any and every therapy you can think of on the board, put them into natural groups. And then what order do you want those groups in? Do you want to start with surgery? Do you want to start with a vitamin? Do you want to start with some nutrition? So we put them into what the group picks. The fun part is we always end up with the same order. This is not rocket science. It's common sense. And then I put it into a pyramid format just because we're used to pyramids. And then more recently, I've kind of redone this and put it more proportional relative to the science. If the science shows that 70 to 90% of our problems are lifestyle caused, and or that should be the treatment, treat the cause, then it should be that proportion in our model. So lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, sleep, rest, stress, relationships, sunshine, air, all those things that our body does well with, or if we don't have them, does poorly with, and should be treating the cause. Number 2, physiology. This is what many people think of as natural treatments. Many people would put naturopathic sorts of things. Could be physical therapy. We're working on restoring normal, healthy physiology with relatively natural methods, with good science. This is not your infomercials on TV, okay? That's not good science usually. But there's all kinds of things in that category. And then we move up to prescription, which by definition is artificial, foreign, higher risk of side effects problems, and then we have your surgery, procedures, chemo, radiation, whatever. We want all options on the table, but we want it in a structure, in a format, in a process that makes sense. So for whatever condition you're dealing with, I think you're going to find this makes a lot of sense. And this is probably the best way to approach putting the pieces together and looking at your options. And I'm engaged with trying to work on changing healthcare such that this becomes the structure, the format through which we process things. Whatever the medical condition is, okay, well, what do we know about the lifestyle, the natural treatments, the prescription, based on the science as our options? And which one is likely going to be the best options at any given point in time? And again, this is common sense. If you're having a heart attack, we're not going to sit down and have a discussion about carrots, okay? We'll save that for later. We're going to the ER. We're going to get things opened up. Then we'll come back and talk about carrots when it's all comfortable. Ideally, we're preventing it. So, giving you that framework and putting this context in, if we do the lifestyle right, we can prevent and or treat a huge number of conditions. Okay, let's get to the food. How would we go about figuring out the ideal human diet? This person has this book, that person has that book, I'm selling this product line, and changes every year, and the research contradicts itself, it seems, or the experts contradict themselves. How would we, common sense, on this planet, working together, figure out what the ideal human diet is? How? What's that? Find out what Methuselah ate, okay. Well, you're warm. You're warm. Go to the manual. Okay, the Bible, Revelation, and I love putting the science and that together, so I'm happy to talk about that. Let's keep going. From a scientific perspective, we're just here on planet Earth, and we want to touch, feel, see, figure out what the best diet is. Yes? Look at our anatomy. What our design is, what it's built for. I love it. What else? Look at who's doing it right. How do we figure out what right is? Who is living longest? And doing well. Okay, so we'd look around the planet and we'd say, okay, who's living the longest, the strongest, the healthiest, and what are they doing? Right? That's pretty common sense. Okay, so there's three things I have in mind. We've picked on two of them already. What else do you think we would do scientifically? Put people on different diets and see how they do. Clinical intervention research. If A, B, and C people are sick, and we do X, Y, and Z treatments, which of them do better? Which one works when we try different diets for different conditions? In controlled clinical science research. Okay? Which would be the number one, number two, number three priorities of those?
I suppose it would probably be determined by the health of the control group.
Health of the control group is going to be an issue, yeah.
Because if you got someone who's got diabetes and, 5 or 6 other things going on, you're probably going to treat that individual from a little bit different perspective than you would someone who's, say,
Yes.
5 foot
We're not going to
165 pounds.
Yes, we're not going to get quite into those weeds. We're staying up a little bit higher here. So things in terms of go around the planet, see what works best, doing intervention trials and or studying anatomy. Actually, there's strengths and weaknesses to all of those. And they come at it from different angles. So we can put them into some kind of order, but scientifically we would probably start with, let's go around the planet and see what actually works. That'd be a good place to start, right? Has anyone done that?
People in Nepal, in the mountains.
Okay, Nepal. We hear about the famous Nepal people.
National Geographic's article several years ago that picked 4 places in the world.
National Geographic, 4 places. Do you remember the name of it? The name of this project? Blue Zones. Yes. So Blue Zones is probably the best example of this. There's all kinds of different types of studies and population things. Blue Zones is probably the best example. National Geographic researchers, they found these places that's called Blue Zones because they got a map of the planet, and the places where there was a lot of 100-plus-year-old people were blue on their map. They said, we're going to go there and see what they are doing. Okay, what did they find out on food? I got to go to one of these a year ago, by the way. A year ago, almost about now, we were in Costa Rica. Out on the Nicoya Peninsula. Not all of Costa Rica is a blue zone, but the Nicoya Peninsula, the west coast, there's this peninsula that comes down where they live long and strong. So I wanted to see this. I've been wanting to actually for years, had this good opportunity, so we went for it. And it was interesting.
People are supposed to be the most
Nice people. I like the people.
Mark, can I just interrupt for a second? We're recording this and we're also live streaming it, so it'd be helpful if you have a question or you want to comment, just raise your hand and we'll bring a mic to you and we'll get you right on.
Okay, I'll try to do better on that for that purpose. I love just going at it with people. Okay, so blue zones. Do any of you know what they found out on food? What were all these places doing as a pattern? Okay, run a mic over here.
It varied slightly with where the zone was, but I think the more plant-based whole food.
Or should I just keep repeating? I mean, I can just repeat what people say.
Test.
I just said it. The results, I think, varied slightly between Sardinia and Okinawa, but the more plant-based whole food, the better they did, I think.
Plant-based whole food. Okay. Is that what you were going to say over here? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, the gentleman that was Buettner, Dan Buettner, the guy that headed this up, the way he summarized it is 95+% plant food. That was a consistent pattern. Okay, so that's the best example we have from that category. What about clinical intervention trials? If someone has diabetes or heart disease, okay, what's our number one killer? Heart disease, United States. Did anyone do any work intervening with a lifestyle program to see what we could do with heart disease? See a hand? Or just shout out a name?
The only one that I can think of is the China study by Colin Campbell. Was it?
China study. That's not the one for the heart disease, but there's some good information there. Yes.
Caldwell Esselstyn.
Caldwell Esselstyn has done some research in that. The big research, the clinical intervention as a big controlled thing, was Dean Ornish. And he did this years ago, actually. Got it published in the best journals in the US and in Europe. And this was a time that doctors largely kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, yeah, he's got heart disease, go get your affairs in order if it looks bad. Nathan Pritikin, his story is amazing. This guy had crazy high cholesterol. He was having heart pain just walking across the room. His cardiologist said, go get your affairs in order. Relatively young man. He started doing his own research, looking around the world and saying, you know what, these people never get heart disease. What are they doing? I think I'm going to do that. Lived into old age, died of something else, had nice, clean, soft arteries when he died as an older man. Dean Ornish did the research with this number one killer in our country that still today we just try to slow down, and he showed you could reverse it. They showed arteries opening up again. We've learned more about the physiology and how some of that works, the blood flow, the clotting properties. Pretty cool stuff. So, clinical intervention trials. Number one killer disease can actually be reversed if we give the body what it's designed for. Dean Ornish's program, 95% plant-based. Surprise, surprise. His program is more pieces. There's 4 components to his program. He will tell you, okay, here's a fun question. What do you think he says is the most important component of his program? The nutrition, the exercise, the group, or the stress relaxation? I hear stress, I hear nutrition, stress, the people, the group, the connection magic. We don't have time to get into it, but it's really cool stuff. I love that topic. He will tell you the most important part of his program is the group. Yes, the nutrition is huge. So Esselstyn did some research on heart disease too. His studies were smaller, so he was at the Cleveland Clinic. He was actually a surgeon, didn't have anything to do with heart disease, but he was interested in it. And when the cardiologist would give up on the heart patients, they'd go to him. They bypassed them as much as they could bypass them, and they're still getting worse. Nothing more they could do, quote unquote. Using surgery, they'd go to him. And he'd work with them. Initial groups were small, but these were really, really sick people, like headed down the drain. And 10, 12, 15 years later, they're still going strong, not having heart attacks. Crazy stuff. And actually, there's a more recent one that just came out in the last couple of years with a larger number of patients, like 170 or 90 or so. Really, really impressive results. In 3+ years, only one person had a tiny stroke. Compared to, in a normal situation, this would have been probably hundreds of events, meaning heart attacks or strokes or something in this time frame. Well over 100 anyway. Anyway, very impressive stuff. Okay, so best human diet, look around the planet, clinical intervention, other conditions, you see the same thing. Diabetes, cancer is a little bit in its own category, though we're starting to learn more and more about the lifestyle impact on cancer too. And now exercise is officially sanctioned as a proven therapy for helping prevent recurrence of cancer by the official cancer bodies. It took them forever to get on that, but the evidence has been huge. Okay, what about anatomy? Does our anatomy teach us anything about what we're designed for? This is actually one of my favorites because it's one of the simplest. I don't have to explain much. I talk to my patients and say, you want to know what you're supposed to eat? Just smile at yourself in the mirror. They look at me kind of funny, like, you okay, doc? So really, just smile at yourself in the mirror. What does your anatomy, your teeth, tell you they're designed for? Obviously, milkshake port. It's got to chew that milkshake, But just look at your teeth and the physics involved. Your teeth will teach you, A, we're not carnivores. We don't have the grinder, cruncher, bone things, canine stuff. We don't have any of that equipment. We're not built for it. We have grinders and incisors, like to bite into apples, kinds of stuff, to grind grains and legumes, kinds of things. But also B, it's also really important to understand, we're also not designed for the refined plant food stuff. The sugar and the white flour and the oil and all this stuff. That's not as found in nature. That's Frankenfood. That's how I like to call it. It's not real food. It's not what nature designed. It's some reconcoction of nature and pieces of it. Okay, so those are the 3 lines of evidence that I think are probably the most powerful and most important that point us towards. And the other question is, do they all say the same thing? Those 3 lines of evidence, or do they say, oh, that's the best diet and that's the best diet? And yeah, they all say the same thing. They all come back to an unrefined plant food-based diet, not getting crazy strict on us here, but that should be the bulk of your fuel. Now, at some point I hope to write a book, my own diet book. Okay, forgive me, another diet book on the market at some point. But hopefully to simplify and clarify things for people. 2 simple principles. I call it the UP diet. UP. 2 principles. Okay, the first one we just talked about. UP, unrefined plant foods. Should make up the majority of your fuel supply for most people. What do you think number 2 is? I'll give you a hint. It starts with UP. You probably don't know this one. We haven't talked about it. It's my own version of this. You cheat, though. You have an inside track. Uniquely personal is what I like to call it. We are not all cookie-cutter product, right? We're not all exactly the same. Yes, we have the same basic anatomy. Okay, small digression here. You've heard about the blood type diet? They got really popular in all this press. You have this blood type, you should eat this blood type. Okay. Type O, I think it is supposed to be high meat diet. I have a question for you. Do type O blood type people have canine teeth? Or do they have plant eater teeth? Maybe we should smile at ourselves in the mirror more often, including blood type O people. Okay, coming back to where we were at. How do we figure this out and apply this? I got off track now, didn't I? Where are we at? Uniquely personal, thank you. So, we're not one size fits all. So there's elements of individuality that are true and some that aren't. The blood type O thing just doesn't pan out when you look at obvious evidence. There's other pieces that do, and we can learn a lot of this from our own experience. One of the things I really encourage people to do is figure things out for yourself. Figure out your body. Start with the basic principles and work with them. Experiment. Reason from cause to effect. Try this. How'd you feel? You feel good? You feel better? You feel worse? Bell peppers are great food with great nutrition. My body doesn't like them. That's okay. There's plenty of other foods on the planet that are good that I don't have to consume bell peppers. Yes?
Both my father and my sister find that eating potatoes causes them to be sleepy.
Potatoes make them sleepy. There was actually at a Stanford conference this last year. I was really shocked to hear this at a Stanford conference. This physician was up front talking about how she basically had an addiction to ice cream, but when she would eat ice cream, within 30 minutes, she was going to sleep, period. Whether she was on duty, she would have to go find a place and lay down because she was going to sleep. Okay, so there's all kinds of things. Gluten. Some people have gluten issues. Some people have soy issues. We went through some things with some of my own family members and weird problems that we finally sorted out. Cashews, cantaloupe. Good foods in general, but maybe not a good match for some people. And is that genetic? Is it for some reason your body has become sensitive to them? We don't know some of it. Some of it we can figure out. That's okay. Figure it out for you. Figure out what works. So, unrefined plant foods is our fundamental design. The research on all the lines of evidence consistently come back to that. But number two, the research also shows that we're not exactly the same. And we need to sort out those individualities. Okay. And it looks like we have maybe 15 minutes more. We had a number of questions on food out here. One other thing I want to just mention on food before we start taking some questions here. Have you ever heard of chronobiology? It's actually pretty cool stuff. How many of you have heard of circadian rhythms? Okay, a lot of you. What is that? Natural rhythms? Biological clock. Our body is amazing. Our physiology is just incredible. It's phenomenal. And it goes through these cycles, typically on a 24-hour cycle, of things that it does. I mean, like what are we going to do 10 o'clock tonight? We're going to be going to bed. We're going to be going to sleep. We do this thing every day, right? What happens if we don't? It's a big problem. It's a huge problem. We don't like life. Our quality goes south really fast. Our physiology goes through these pretty big cycles every 24 hours. And there's other cycles too, of course. That is really important for food as well. If you want to manage your weight, do you know what some of the studies show is one of the most consistent findings of people that are successful losing weight and keeping it off versus those that aren't, relative to timing of food? Breakfast. The people that eat breakfast do better on their weight. It's one of the most consistent findings. All the different variables in terms of diet and weight and all this stuff, breakfast, very consistent. Do we tend to eat breakfast in America? We like to skip it. When do we eat our big meal? At dinner, in the evening. The body metabolism is much like a furnace, a fireplace. When do you put the wood in? When you want the fire to burn, right? If you're about to walk away from that fire, do you pack the whole fireplace full and close it up? That's what we do with dinner in America. We pile it in, shut the doors, and it just smolders and smokes all night. And in the morning we wonder why, oh my goodness, I gotta have 3 cups of coffee to wake up. Versus, oh, okay, it's time to get going. Oh, let's put in some fuel. Want to go. And of course we have our challenges with our busy life and making all that work. But metabolically, that's what our body wants. Our body wants us to put the fuel in when we're going to want it to burn, and when we're going to be shutting down and the metabolism should be going into rest phase, we want to let the metabolism rest. It may take a little bit of getting used to for some people, but really important. Actually, one of the really interesting finding, brain science. Alzheimer's, huge problem. Dementia, big problem, very poor treatment, very expensive, very problematic. Chronobiology, you know what one of the important pieces is for keeping your brain healthy? To have at least 12 hours per 24-hour cycle, especially during sleep, that your brain can rest metabolically. During sleep is when your brain is taking out the trash from all the business of the day. It can't take out the trash while it's still processing stuff metabolically. You gotta let the machinery wind down, let the trash keepers come in and do their thing, keep your brain healthy. If you don't take anything else home from tonight, take that home. Really important chronobiology. And we'll skip some of the other pieces on that. Okay, let's make sure we cover some of the things you wanted to cover tonight. I think probiotics was one, or do you want to take the mic around?
On that chronobiology, you said 12 hours of brain downtime, but you don't mean 12 hours of sleep?
12 hours of metabolic rest for the brain.
What does that mean?
So metabolically, that means, well, sometimes we would call it fasting. It just means that we're not putting fuel in. So if you have to fast for a blood draw the next morning, they want you to not have eaten for 12 hours. Same kind of idea. Yeah, we think we can do it for the blood draw, but we don't think we can do it every day. The body is amazing. I was watching a nature program at one point. I think it was these nomads in Arctic-like conditions out in, not Siberia, but out in that direction of the world. They travel in these yurts, portable yurts, and they live off of horse milk and stuff. That's all they have out there. What shocked me was when they have babies, the way they feed them and diaper them and bathe them is on a very consistent schedule. And they feed them and then hold them over a pot until they go to the bathroom, and then they wipe them up, wrap them up with no diaper. And they don't go to the bathroom again until the next time they're fed and held over the pot. I was I didn't know you could do that. Wow, that's phenomenal. With our own children, we didn't do that. Unfortunately, I didn't know about that. But in America, in our society, we think snacking is just, it has to be this way. Kids need their snacks. Says who? Where'd that come from? So we said, look, we're going to feed our kids 3 meals a day while they're growing up. Eat as much as you want, kids. Have at it. But we're not snacking. Get on with the rest of life. Do you know how often they complained about not having a snack? 0. Do you know how often they complained about being hungry in between meal times? 0. Now, if it got to be an hour or two past a normal meal time, yeah, they'd have normal hunger. Their body is used to eating that time. Hey, where's the food? It's not showing up. Our body is amazing. It is way more trainable, teachable, and will work for us more than we realize. It's actually very, very cool. But it does take some adaptation. So if we're used to one pattern for a while, if we're used to the big dinners at night, yeah, it's going to take your body a while to get used to that. Weeks, a couple weeks, typically. Yes?
So would you include in giving that body that metabolic rest, are we talking about not just foods, but are we looking at things like shutting down from watching stuff that stimulates us, whether it be the digital stuff, the TV stuff, various things of that nature?
Yes. So other things other than food. So yes, to answer your question, short answer is yes. One of the other things that I'm doing, I'm running the Lifestyle Medicine Foundation. The website, lifestylefacts.org, we're creating 3, 4, 5-minute long videos with national experts on conditions and issues such as sleep. So we've got some great content up there and more coming on just what you talked about. How do we manage our sleep and our brain to get best sleep? The research is showing that especially blue light, an hour plus before bedtime, is an issue. So and blue light, the electronics, the TVs, electronics and stuff is particularly blue. But they're starting to have things like on my computer, I do a lot of work and that's one of my challenges, but I've got an app on my computer that will start to change the color after sunset, and it takes it to the orange and the dim and takes out all the blues. Makes it hard to do graphics work, but other stuff is just fine. And now it's on the new version of the iPhone. New iOS has a dimming setting you can do. Stimulation in other senses also, yes. You probably don't want to go out and run 5 miles and go to bed 15 minutes later. Not the best idea. Exercise is good. We want you getting the exercise, but figure out, what pattern your body is trying to do and try to work with it on multiple levels. So, and again, we can go back to the, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual components, and are we winding down and going into a true rest state? Do you know what the most common sleep problem in America is? Insomnia. There's other problems, sleep apnea and whatnot. Insomnia. Do you know what I hear from my patients most often as what's behind their sleep trouble, insomnia? Can't shut it off. It's going and I'm worrying and well, how much of that is the TV that, I just got done watching 20 people get killed right before I tried to go to sleep, with all this blue light flashing in my face. Well, surprise, that's not going to work on the physical level. It's also not going to probably work on the emotional level. What if I've got stress going on either at work or with my spouse or my family that I'm going to bed with, that I haven't processed? Mental, spiritual level. Are we in a place that we're right with our Maker, right with the world? Are we not? Or are we using that to process and deal with things? So yes, we need it on all levels. I think we have oh good, he's got the mic.
What about the issue of hydration?
Hydration. Talking water or other things?
Yes, the real water.
Okay, so let's kind of touch on two extremes here. One of the things that's in the news recently is these energy drinks, and they're starting to become a problem in the military. I actually didn't have a chance to read all of that, but it keeps popping up. ER docs are starting to see problems with the energy drinks. We're doing crazy stuff with our hydration these days. What is the human body designed for? Is it designed for this kind of stuff? No. Well, what if we actually looked at nature? What a concept. Looked at nature. How does nature work? What do we find in nature for beverages? Some people like to call it Adam's ale, water. Surprise, surprise. Interestingly enough, in medical scientific circles, there has not been a lot of good research on this. We're like 65, 70% water and we don't research this stuff? This is crazy. So some research at Loma Linda has started to pull some of this out. The Adventist Health Studies, which some of you may have been part of. Thank you if you were. Really, really well done studies. they're finding that water, but not other beverages, you start to see significant differences in terms of some of these chronic diseases, heart disease and so forth. You can look at the difference men and women, pretty consistent. Most physicians, including urologists or nephrologists, will tell you, oh, you don't need the 8 glasses that everybody says you do. That's not necessarily for ideal health, that's just what is survivability. And again, there's not been a lot of research in this. So did you have any more specific question or not?
It's just a general issue because I recognize the fact that even for myself, adequate is hard because it's part of a lifestyle issue, and that means in most cases you have to think about the fact that I need to get a glass of water.
Think about it, yeah. One thing I'll throw out there, there's a really interesting book that brings out some really good points called Mindless Eating by Brian Wansink. He's a researcher. The research is people's eating. It's actually a fun book to read because he does all these tricks on people to see what they actually do versus what they think they do. We are so clueless about ourselves. It's hilarious. Brian Wansink. Wansink, I believe it is. Book is Mindless Eating. He may have a newer one. But really fun experiments in there about what we do and how we work. What I really like about his book, one of the pieces, is at the end of every chapter, he has what he calls re-engineering strategies. So much of what we do is a function of our environment, what we have around us, much more so than we realize. If you have a bag of chips sitting out, what are you going to tend to do? Eat it. Versus what if it's just out of sight? Makes a big difference. It actually makes a really big difference. So at the end of each chapter, he takes the research he's covered in that chapter and he just has some bullet points that says, you want to make your life a lot easier to be healthier? Do A, B, and C, and then forget about it. So his strategy is not like sweat every day, all day long to worry about, oh, I got to remember to go drink my water. He says, look, understand how you actually work, set yourself up for success, get on with life. It's good stuff. Yes?
Yeah, just if you could touch on the processed foods, the impact on the body versus like the whole plant food diet.
Processed foods. That's a big topic. I mean, there's so much of our food today that's processed in every which way from Sunday. Again, it gets back to your fundamental principle is, what's the match between this human body and your anatomy and physiology and nature? And how do you best replicate that on the one side, on the other side, avoid the typical ways that is messed up? So processed foods, again, it's such a huge topic. The more we get back to as nature intended, in general, the better we're going to do. Now, there are some... How many of you have heard of Joel Fuhrman? Oh, okay, surprising number of you. I like some of Joel's work, and what he's developed is what he calls a nutritarian approach. And he's created kind of a system of measuring nutrition per calorie. So even if you go to, okay, there's some people that will go to a vegetarian or vegan diet, and that vegan diet is vegan cookies and Coca-Cola. Okay, well, that's nice. You're not killing any animals, at least not outright in the process. But is this what nature intended? No. Well, it was really interesting, and some of this came up. Loma Linda did the Adventist health studies, and they sorted a bunch of this stuff out, and then people in Europe went to try to replicate it, and they divided people up, by vegan and vegetarian and meat eaters and whatnot, and they weren't seeing some of the differences. And they're like, what's going on? So they started digging in and asking questions. They started finding out just this kind of thing. Well, the people in the vegan category weren't doing the same thing the Adventist vegans were. They're eating the Coca-Cola and the vegan cookies for animal rights issues, and they weren't getting the health benefits. So within those categories of different types of dietary patterns, how do we maximize nutrition? And you can look at nutrition in different ways. Yes, we need a mix of, proteins and carbs and fats and whatnot, But again, what are we designed to run on of those things? And how do those tend to come in nature? How do I best replicate that? And then again, adapt for myself. If I lived on 50% bell peppers, I would not be a happy camper. It just doesn't work for me. That's a very broad question. I don't know if that gets to more or less what you were interested in or not. Okay, back here.
I think I'm going to follow up on his questions for just a moment. And when he says processed food, it'd be like those veggie wieners out there that are on the market, whatever you got out there, the veggie burgers. They've got so many stuff out there, the smart bacons, I don't care what it is. They're all processed. So I think that's where I'm leaning, where he's leaning, is that things that are processed, are they necessarily, they're not natural.
Okay,
Are
so
they
the
healthy?
veggie meat stuff.
Veggie, whatever, processed anything.
Okay, good. If you look at things, it's basically you're going to find nutrition on a spectrum. On one end, it's what does nature intend? And how far, on the other end, how far can you get away from that? And there's different cultural things that influence the spectrum and how we do things. So in some of the circles, like around here, you're going to find these Vegemite stuff, which is a processed food. So I'm going to tell you one of the things I want to do at some point here. I actually want to create a line of whole plant food, ready-to-eat foods, where we do things like, whether it's a hot dog form or a meatball form, we take what if we took the whole edamame soybeans and just ground them up, sort of hamburger consistency, and put some walnuts and some oats and some seasonings and stuff with them, and did that really, really well? That would be all whole plant foods. The reason why I bring that up is I don't want us to think that we can't do convenient, that we can't do wholesome and tasty and convenient altogether, because we can. But we don't tend to do that. We tend to just, want to open a can and throw it in the micro or whatever. But that's where we all need to collectively work towards. How do we use whole, unrefined plant foods to make them stay whole and unrefined and plant, but also convenient and tasty and well done? So, give me another one.
I want to add to that, since we're into this process stuff. So you hear about these things like soy isolates, pea protein. I mean, it's a big thing out there on the market, and there's these pros and cons and stuff about these, I call it adulterated whatever of the plant food, whether that is healthy or not healthy.
Yeah. I mean, the more refined you get something, the more unhealthy it's going to be. And it's interesting to do an exercise and figure out what is worse than something else, and where does something fall on the scale. And what we as human beings tend to do, given our own perspectives and biases, is we often get those things mixed up. We switch things. We think, well, this thing's okay, but that one's not. And it actually might not be in the places on the scale that we think it is. So just like the vegan cookies and Coca-Cola example, they're avoiding the meats, but is the Coca-Cola and the vegan cookies just as bad? Probably. So there's a lot of the stuff we do with these processed things, maybe avoiding meat, maybe it's vegetarian, that might not be that much different health-wise than meat or higher quality meat. Yes?
Can you speak to the concept of intermittent fasting and the ideal times to have those meals if you're doing that?
Intermittent fasting. So depending on your definition of that, fasting is something that is a foreign concept to us in America, but has been throughout much of human history and actually has a lot of potential medicinal value. So we touched on one thing in terms of, we would call it fasting in America. It's not fasting in the context of human history in terms of just not eating for 12 hours overnight. Let me get to a principle behind that, which I think is probably even more important, that will help us apply everywhere. Our body is always doing these cycles. Is your heart working or resting most of the time? Okay, we had some disagreement there. It's actually resting most of the time. Now, some of you are thinking, what? I'd drop over dead, right? Okay, if you look at an EKG rhythm strip, right? Blip, 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 blip. The blip, blip is the work. In between is the rest. It's actually resting more than it's working. What happens if you take out that rest phase in between? It's just blip, 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 blip. Is that good or bad? You're going to have a problem. Like, really soon, like, who's going to dial 911? Who's going to get the paddles? VTAC, big problem. On a cellular, so that's the organ level. We can look at different organs. If we look at the cell level, do you remember from high school biology, the cell replication cycle? Goes through mitosis and divides and becomes two cells. There's a rest phase in there. What happens if you take out the rest phase? Do you know what those cells are? Cancer. Normal cells that have lost the ability to rest are cancer. So, and then we see it on the sleep level as a whole human organism. So from the whole person level to the organ level to the cell level, there's these cycles of activity and rest. Rest is huge. Seventh-day Adventist Church. What is seventh day? What is that about? Rest. The Sabbath, rest. It's a huge principle built into the universe. It's built into our physiology at every level. So the fasting gets back to that. Do we actually have rest metabolically, periodically? You look through the Bible, so there was the weekly rest, but then there was also special rests, which might be parallel to, a special time of not eating for a longer period of time. When you actually rest your metabolism, you do some pretty cool things. You can help restore your insulin sensitivity, which is part of the problem with diabetes. We become insulin resistant, type 2 diabetes. You fast, your metabolism, your cells start to get sensitive to insulin again. They start to work right again. Joel Fuhrman, many of you know Joel Fuhrman, he actually wrote a book on fasting, and I don't think he's still doing it, but for years he would treat people with therapeutic fasting, especially conditions that were autoimmune, like rheumatoid arthritis. There's actually some pretty good science behind this. You do prolonged periods of fast, and in talking with him personally, his experience has been with each serious fast, some of these really severe rheumatoid arthritis patients they would get better. Their symptoms would come down. They do another one of these prolonged fasts, their symptoms would come down some more. It helps reset the immune system. So there's a lot of benefit, potentially, to fasting. And there's different ways of doing that too. There's a complete water-only fast. Some people just do juicing sorts of fasts. Actually, some pretty interesting results with that. And I think we've probably run out of time. So I think my presentation is concluded, and we're doing, well, I'll let other people take it over here. I'll just follow along. So thank you. I think we still have some more things to do.
Test. There we go. Rod, if you grab that basket right behind you, we need to give away. We have a number of resources and things. We have a table out there that has some books, also pedometers and other things, and we want to at least give 2 people the opportunity to choose one of those items. So if you have a ticket ending in 569, all right, very good. And let's get one more. 569, and the other one is 567. Okay.
Tell me your first name.
All right.
Jesse.
So take that to the table and select something that would be All right. A blessing to you. Thank you, Rod. We're going to have a little more question and answer session with a wider panel at this time. Dr. Braman, we definitely want you back. So why don't we come on up and sit here. Annette Ward is also going to be on this panel. Annette is a nursing instructor. She holds a Master's of Nursing Science degree. And Jesse Richards is a registered dietitian.
Can I use a handheld now?
Let's try another one. Okay. Jessie Richards is a registered dietitian, and she holds a Master's of Science in Nutrition and Dietetics. So we're going to open up the floor for other questions, and I believe we have a couple of roving mics also to help. So just raise your hand and let's ask the panel what's on your mind and get some good answers.
I have a question, Pastor, that I just want.
All right, let's hear
that
it.
I wanted to make sure we covered. What do you recommend, like for then the food pyramid as far as fats and carbs and protein, and what's the limited food and what should be the bulk?
I think that gets
Uniquely
still on
personal.
here? I think that gets into some of the uniquely personalized component. I think different people are going to do better depending on their activity level, their particular genetics, their environment, in terms of some of that mix. And I'm a huge believer in figure things out how your body works. So start with the basic principles. You know, we're fundamentally designed for unrefined plant foods, and we can get other information on that either, you know, from, whether it's from the Bible or elsewhere, as to what that may look like, but start working with it. You know, be okay to try something different. Don't just read a book and think this is the only way it has to be.
If I could add on to that, let me see if yours works. Does this one work? Okay. I like your approach of look around, look at nature, and see what is the food made of. And often the food is a higher source of carbohydrate, which is interesting that that's kind of unpopular right now, because plant foods are, it's a fairly high carb diet, but it's unrefined carb. And so you do end up eating more carbohydrates than protein or fat, but the carbs are from fruit, whole fruits, beans, nut, whole grains. That's going to give you a lot of good carb.
Yeah, and carbs have gotten they've gotten a lot of bad rap unnecessarily for natural, whole, carbohydrate-rich foods. One of the things that makes me a little bit crazy is that with diabetes, which is a big carbohydrate issue, people in their diabetes education classes are never taught how other things affect their body's ability to handle carbs. If you eat a stick of butter, high saturated animal fat, it's not going to do anything to your sugar, which looks good at first. But then you eat carbs after that, you're all jacked up. Your metabolism can't deal with the carbs right. Whereas if you didn't have that goop, that butter in there, your body would do great. So again, it gets back to, are we going back to nature and running the body how it's designed? Or are we playing these funny little games chasing our tail? Oh, I can eat a high-fat, high-butter diet and my sugar's not going up. Meanwhile, your plumbing is plugging up. If you want a really interesting visual on some of this, go to YouTube and search Okay, YouTube, and do a search for the terms blood sludge. Blood sludge, S-L-U-D-G-E. And maybe throw in the term McDougall. John McDougall, I think, posted it.
Feeding off of that. Turn that off.
All right.
what you're going to see there is, under the microscope, live blood vessels, small blood vessels, just like 1, 2, or 3 cells wide, the blood flowing through, the cells flowing through. Before a meal, you see them flowing normally, freely, and then after a high-fat meal, and it just totally sludges them up. That's what's going on in your whole body. And this is especially important for arthritis. Arthritis is actually the most expensive condition in this country. Think about all the joint replacements, all the disability. Well, guess what? Your joints are the end of the line on circulation. There's no blood vessels in your joints, in your cartilage. The circulation has to come up to the edge, to the synovial tissue, and let off the nutrients and pick up the waste while it floats around through the joint. So you plug up your blood vessels, your joints are going to get hit especially hard. They're going to fall apart. You're going to get degenerative joint disease.
Very, very interesting. We have a question back there. Thank you, Mike.
I read an article recently that basically said that a lot of you health food nuts think that you're eating healthy when you go and buy non-GMO organic bread or pasta. And it basically said anything that's made from flour isn't healthy and you shouldn't eat it. And that it's no more healthy than the white, probably. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
I can tell you, I went to a health nutrition center this summer, and they had interesting things to say. They were totally whole food, so, I haven't had a piece of bread since July. But pasta they were okay with, and they said if you have brown rice pasta, so they were against gluten just because a lot of people are insensitive. If you're not, that's not an issue. But if it's whole grain pasta, they said it absorbs so much water that you're not getting a concentrated form of refined carbs. So even if it's pasta, they said the water diminishes the caloric density down to like if you were eating brown rice pasta and brown rice they said were equal. You may disagree with that, but that's what they said at True North.
Well, I like to try not to get too distracted with what not to do, because we can find a lot of people telling us what not to do. And I like to look at the cultures and what people have done who are doing well, and I think of the Adventist Health Study and what people might have been eating, the vegetarians and vegans that had better health outcomes, and it wasn't that they were gluten-free. They were probably eating bread and grains, but I like, if you have a gluten intolerance, that's something that if you have problems, that might be one of your problems. But if you don't have a gluten intolerance, getting a nice whole grain, especially sprouted grain bread, I like to go less refined, of course, on the grain.
And I think I heard 2 different questions in there. One was grains and one was GMO?
She said non-GMO, I think.
Or you said non-GMO?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Basically, it just said any grains that are made into flour. It didn't say not to eat gluten. It just said not to eat any grains that were ground
Gotcha.
into flour.
Just one comment on that I just will add. Part of what we see clinically with people is a burnout of their ability to handle carbs. Some of that will be because we're doing things like eating a lot of fat, but some of it will be, especially with diabetes, if someone is fairly advanced, the picture that I get in my mind from working with patients is that some of these people, even when they do then switch to a really good diet, their pancreas is at some degree of burnout. They have pushed it so hard with so many refined carbs for so long that it's tired, and it will recover often remarkably well, but not always 100%. And that person may be more sensitive to carbs and or refined carbs. So that's again one of those situations where figure out what works for the person. Take the basic principle, maximize the nutrition, but then work it for you as an individual.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Don't be bashful. All right, right here.
Probiotics are a big thing right now. If people, or have they done a study of people changing their lifestyle with the diet to the plant-based, do they need to be taking these probiotics anymore? Any of you, I don't care.
Well, I always like to focus on the prebiotics. So prebiotics meaning what is feeding our probiotic or our bacteria. So if you're doing okay, if you think your gut might be okay, I recommend just focusing on prebiotics, which would be fiber and resistant starch, because that's what feeds your good gut bacteria. And focus on getting a good intake of that. You know you're doing well when you're a super pooper, as Michael, that's from Michael Greger, I know, I've heard him say that. But a super pooper, one that poops more than once a day, your stool is approximately 50% bacteria. Is that shocking? I'm always shocked by that. So if you're eating more fiber and more resistant starch, now fiber is undigested carbohydrate. It's carbohydrate that's in a shape. It's actually pure sugar, but it's in a shape that we can't break down. So what happens is this pure sugar that is in a really special shape goes down, we can't break it down, goes down to our gut bacteria and our colon primarily, where they feast on it because they have no problem breaking it down. It's like a spaghetti fest dropped from heaven. And when they eat that, they proliferate. And as they proliferate, they can battle off the bad guys, the bacteria that aren't as good for us. And so yes, we do change our gut bacteria when we eat more plant-based, because the portion of food that is not digested would be fiber and resistant starch, which would be from beans, whole grains, vegetables, fruits, especially berries. Now, if you're eating other types of foods, they can cause more sugars or they can cause bacteria that aren't as good. If you're eating higher sugar, if you're eating more meats, there are some bacteria that aren't as good. But if we can eat more of the plant foods, then it gives us more of the army that can help beat off the bad guys. Yeah.
Jesse, you mentioned fiber, but you also mentioned resistant starch, and that's a term I'm not familiar with. I wonder if you can maybe clarify that for us.
Okay, so resistant starch is, it's a chain that is straight, like a starch chain, but our body doesn't break it down, just like fiber.
Where would we get resistant starch from? What foods?
So beans, grains, oats, and I think a lot of food has the resistant starch. Bananas have it still, so I think a lot of plants have it. The way you can get more of it would be when you cook your food and then cool your food. Apparently more resistant starch is created when you cool your food again. So leftover oatmeal is a great idea. Leftover potatoes. There's one good reason to eat your leftovers. Pasta is the same way. When it's cooked, then cooled again, we actually get, it's starch that is like fiber, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I want to add one thing about dietary changes and gut bacteria. You know, we have bacteria that is unique to our diet. And when we make a change in our diet, there is a changing of the guard of gut bacteria, and it is never pleasant. So if you're going from a bad diet to a good diet, there is going to be some sensations going on. If you go from a good diet to a bad diet, so every time you change your diet significantly, expect a little GI distress till.
So how long should we hold out to say, well, is this working or is this not working? Is it a couple weeks or?
Jesse says a couple weeks. You know, it's
Okay.
been so long since I've changed, I can't
Okay.
remember.
All right, that's helpful.
I always tell people you can take a few, gas X during that time if you want.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll spare you some stories on that episode. To get back to your question, do you need to take a probiotic if you're eating whole plant-based? So this is something I've kind of struggled with as a clinician. So as I work with patients, but then I look at the research and I talk to the laboratory people, and the research is consistently showing that the bad bacteria are associated with a bad diet, and the good bacteria are associated with a good diet. So the question becomes, do I need a probiotic if I'm eating a really good diet that's going to fuel the good bacteria anyway? I haven't found anything yet that says you need to do that. So, if you're going to be somewhere in between and you're still having GI symptoms, it could make sense to try it. The research coming out on the gut bacteria is huge. It's really impressive. I mean, it is a big deal. We're still starting to, figure it out, exactly what does it mean and how do we apply it. But I haven't seen anything yet that says we need probiotics if we're eating the really good diet.
Okay, that is helpful. We have a question in the back there.
Back to Jeanette and Jesse were saying this a minute ago. He recently switched to a plant-based diet from a standard American diet the 1st of November or so. And he just told me a few days ago, he said, Larry, I'm actually sitting on the pot a couple times a day now. He was really excited about that. Before, it might be a couple days between.
Oh, wow. Something's a little hot here, but anyway.
Yeah, it's not working. The purple one is not working.
Test.
Try the black one.
Testing.
There we go.
That's better. Doc, you mentioned the fact that if you watched a YouTube video that had to deal with cholesterol and the fat in the blood, have you seen anything on the fact that a lot of the Orientals will drink tea or something hot after their meals? Have you seen any studies on that? Because I understand that helps to flush the oil out of the system.
There are a lot of things interacting and going on. Alcohol is a thinner. You can use alcohol to help break down fat. There's another study that I just stumbled across by accident last week from 30 or 40 years ago. Are we not on?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on.
Hello?
Yeah.
I'll just speak up so at least you can hear me here. A study that I just stumbled across last week from 30 or 40 years ago with pictures, same idea, small blood vessels after a high-fat meal, before and after, but in type A or type B people. And what they saw was that in the type A people, most of them got the dramatic narrowing, plugging up, slowing down kind of thing, and the type B people didn't. So there's a lot of other forces going on. I mean, the high-fat meal is one, but our state of mind, our regular state of mind, which gets into our nervous system regulation of our blood vessels, alcohol, tea, what else we eat at the meal, there's all kinds of other things going on. So it's going to be always a mix. But I can't speak to the tea thing specifically.
Do we have any other questions? All right, we do.
Okay, I have a couple different questions. A couple years back, my wife and I, we both started eating vegetarian, and so she actually gained weight, and I actually lost weight. Is there a way to tell whether you have a high carb metabolism or a high protein metabolism?
Hopefully in the future we're going to be able to sort that out with laboratory testing. At this point it's basically, again, experiment with yourself and see what works or doesn't work. For whatever reason, I have noticed a pattern between male and female, especially with vegetarian and higher carb. Women tend just my observation, I don't have statistics to quote you, but women tend to gain more weight and guys don't. And I don't have a good explanation for that yet, but I have observed that.
I was going to say I had nothing to add, but basically, women, from a preservation of life standpoint, were made to be able to shut their metabolism off on a dime and last through starvation. So when it comes to gaining weight easily or making the food go the very farthest it can, women are pre-selected for that. Do you not think? I mean, they did studies in Europe in Holland during World War II, when pregnant women were getting about 400 calories a day, and there was no increase in perinatal mortality, or it's because they were made to shut their metabolism down for periods of starvation or late spring, so the species would continue. So I'm sorry, Lorena.
All right, there's a very practical question, but it's got to be a huge answer. What should we be eating for breakfast?
Plants. I'm just kidding. Well,
Horrible.
okay, should we? I was going to recommend, I like to start with a healthy starch and a healthy carbohydrate, because that is our energy source. Or that's what our body prefers for energy, is carbohydrate. Our brain, our body, our muscles, they all prefer to run off of carbohydrates. So I love oats for breakfast. Oats has a good mix of carbohydrate, some protein, and the good type of carbohydrate. Lots of fiber and resistant starch in oats. I like fruit for breakfast because it's another good source of carbohydrate with the fiber, and the fiber helps bind that sugar and keeps your spike, your glycemic spike, a little bit more stable. And then I like to combine oats, fruit, with a little bit of healthy fat and fiber with some nuts or seeds, and that's kind of one of my big basics.
I just wanted to add one thing. So just because this talk is on weight management, so if people are trying to lose weight and they've tried things that haven't worked, you know, some of us have that metabolism, so when that famine comes, we'll be ready. Sorry.
I don't know.
Anyway, but for me, it wasn't so much what I had, but it was that 12-hour or more fasting window. So for me, it didn't matter how many calories. You know, I ate the right number of calories. I ate the right type of foods. But I ate, you know, throughout the day because, I mean, not Dr. Braman, but another doctor says, you know, you have to eat your 3 meals, eat throughout the day, small, frequent meals. That was what was killing it for me. And once I ate my calories in a smaller period of hours, and then had no nutrients. And I'm telling you, 3 cherry tomatoes that I went on my walk that I picked out of the garden would be enough to stop my metabolism. But I really go like 16 hours of not eating and then 6 to 8 hours of eating, and that had dramatic results.
I would like to second that, because ever since you shared that with me, I have just been dropping weight. And I've been down to 2 meals a day, a breakfast and then maybe lunch at about 2 or 3. And I'm not bashful about my eating. I enjoy my food. But having that time with no snacks and everything, and then waiting till morning to break the fast at breakfast, has really been doing me a lot of good in that realm. Yeah. All right. We maybe have time for one more.
Sorry, the second question that I had was, do you guys know of any plant-based foods that can actually help you build muscle? Just because, you know, I want to stay away from, you know, eating meat to build protein and stuff like that. Is there any plant-based foods that are really high in protein?
I would say first make sure you're getting enough calories. You're not going to build muscle if you aren't getting enough calories. And then you have to do the work in combined. So those are two important things. So you're working out and you are having enough calories, period. And then some higher protein ones are going to be like your tempeh, which is from soybeans. Soybeans are really like the higher protein plant food that's out there. Tofu, tempeh, yeah, but beans. Now, I don't like to tell people to eat lots of protein. Like, are you going to be a vegan bodybuilder? Or, because they might have to do some different tricks. But if you just want to build some muscle, I don't think having a ton of protein is the answer. It's not good for the body anyway.
Now, I know you're not going to believe me because of my bodybuilding physique, but I do know something about this. And actually, a lot of bodybuilders, forget plant-based, forget health. For just definition, they use intermittent fasting, because when you have that long period, your body has no option but to use body fat. If you're introducing a little bit of food, it can stretch it out and get by. But if you're going a long period, it forces it to use body fat. So bodybuilders who eat who knows what will do intermittent fasting. They'll get like 3,000 calories and eat it within 6 hours. But then the rest of the time, they're burning fat. So they really are defined.
So, no, I'm not going to counteract. So protein is a bigger concern than it needs to be. If you're eating a good variety, good quality food, you really don't have to worry about it. Just for lunch today, okay, just as an example, so I had some leftover salad, I added some stuff to it, grabbed a can of garbanzo beans, happened to look at the label, just because I'm into that kind of stuff, and in my can of garbanzo beans that I dumped in my salad, I got 21 grams of protein. That's a lot of protein, not counting anything else I was doing. So it's really not hard if you're getting a good variety. If you want to pay attention to the labels, go ahead and do that. I encourage people to read the labels. But it's not the protein. Our country is obsessed with protein.
Do you need high protein intake to grow muscles?
No.
I mean, what do elephants? What do gorillas?
Okay, yeah. I mean, we could look at a lot of things, but.
Do you need high protein to grow muscles? And that's kind of the implication. And Dr. Braman is saying no, that's not the case.
Right. I mean, when you look at all the people around the planet that live long and healthy, they're not doing a quote-unquote high-protein diet. And they're strong, and they're living long, and they're not getting the osteoarthritis and the heart disease and any of the rest of that. And a lot of these guys, we have 80-year-old guys packing 50 pounds on their head up the mountain. Hello? I mean, this is tough man stuff. I think I might have seen a book out there, Engine 2 Diet, Rip Esselstyn, triathlete, fireman, vegan.
Yeah, there's a lot of vegan bodybuilders.
All right, I think we are just about out of time. Let's thank our panelists for answering our questions. Thank you so much. And they did talk about some food, and I'm curious as what is waiting for us in the other room. I think I'm ready to enjoy a good, tasty meal together with each of you and with the doctor and the nutritionist and the nurse. And anyway, we'll have some good fellowship as well as a delicious meal, but let's ask the Lord to bless our fellowship and the food together as we enjoy it. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for, Lord, you gave us hunger. And you didn't just give us hunger, but you gave us so many different ways, beautiful, delicious ways to satisfy it. You could have just given us one kind of thing to eat that would have sustained our life, but you haven't chosen to do that. You've given us a wide variety of many, many delicious and good things to eat. Father, we thank you for that, your creative power, and be with us as we bless our fellowship, bless our conversation, bless the food, and we thank you for those who have prepared it for us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, you are excused. We have some people that will direct you toward where our fellowship hall is, and I look forward to enjoying the meal with you.